Hello everybody and welcome to Inaba. This is Persona 4. I know I'm a bit late to the party, what with the remake presumably not far away and all that, but I've been meaning to talk about this video game for a long time. I love gaming. Look, I cherish Persona 4 in a lot of ways, but I find it really hard to actually talk about. Bringing up Persona in conversation is something I always do with bated breath. And that's only saying that, yeah, I've played one, and, you know, I kind of liked it. Never mind liking it enough to do this. So, before we begin proper, I want to take a moment to clarify what this video is and what it is not. Even though titles don't mean much on YouTube, and me describing what the video is doesn't mean much either, you can think of this video as a kind of retrospective and pseudo-analysis. I'll be taking you all the way through all the interesting parts of Persona 4, both of the main story and of the social links, which we'll get to what that is. And I'll be giving my opinion on what certain things might mean or just how I understand them. So I'll basically recapping the game for you while also telling you what I think about it. Persona 4 actually has a lot of other media surrounding it in a compilation type deal. If you think of something like Final Fantasy VII and how that's more than one game, but like 20 things. It's a kind of a similar idea for Persona 4. You have a fighting game, you have a rhythm game, you have a full-blown anime for the base game and an addendum for the Golden, which was a re-release of the original game. And I will not be talking about any of those. I will be talking about and playing Persona 4 The Golden on PC, which was a re-release of the original Persona 4 that came out in 2012 on the PlayStation Vita, and remained in that prison cell for a solid 8 years before coming to Steam in 2020. Now, seeing as I want to be big famous YouTuber man, okay, I am contractually obligated to tell you now to please like the video and subscribe. If you like the sound of this guy's voice in your ears while you're grinding RuneScape, you should subscribe. You could be the first person ever to subscribe to my YouTube. Sorry about that. I had to. It's in the contract, dude. And finally, I have to mention that the first part of this video is pretty much going to be me recapping the story without really saying much else, but try to make it through it. I promise I have more to say than just recapping the story. The reason I'm doing it like this is that in case it gets your interest and you want to play the game for yourself, you can go do that without having been spoiled. Disclaimer: I'll be presenting this intro as a new player would experience it. This inevitably means some technically incorrect information, because the correct information would be spoilers. Okay? Oh, dude, it just started raining too. This could not have come at a better time. Alright, so before we even get to the story, we find ourselves in a place called the Velvet Room, which looks like the interior of a limousine. Here we meet Igor and Margaret, the master of whatever this place is, and his assistant. Igor explains that the Velvet Room exists between mind and matter, between conscious and subconscious. What? Since that's all we get with regards to the Velvet Room for now, I'll explain later. You're prompted to type in the name you want the main character to have, although his canon name is Yunarukame, so that's what I'm gonna go with. Igor then pulls out tarot cards and tells your fortune. You will encounter a misfortune at your destination, and a great mystery will be imposed upon you. Intriguing. Tarot is a recurring theme throughout the Persona series, and we'll dive into that topic a little bit later as well. Explaining it now would not make much sense, so just stay patient for now. The game is set in 2011, beginning on April 11th, when the protagonist arrives at the rural town of Inaba, having to stay with his uncle Ryotaro Dojima and his daughter Nanako because your parents are going away to work abroad for a year. What exactly your parents do, who they are, or why they're leaving is never explained, and it wouldn't be important anyway. Inaba itself is based on the real-world city of Fuefukishi in Yamanashi Prefecture, Japan, although where exactly the fictional town of Inaba is never explained. Now, per Japanese census data, the population of Fuefuki in 2011 was roughly 70,000 people across 30,000 households. Now, in Japan, rural areas are referred to as inaka. Inaka literally means the countryside, or someone from. the countryside. What exactly constitutes a place or town being Inaka is not clear, like, at all. There are some Reddit comments I found, like this one from user Barbecue Boy, who says he's been stationed in a city of 300,000 people through something called the JET program, and people still ask him what he thinks of life in the countryside. The JET program would take too long to explain, so just think of it as a Japanese governmental initiative to import English teachers. Basically. In any case, it's not relevant to Persona 4. My point is that the fictional town of Inaba is clearly and firmly rural. Your uncle Dojima works as a police detective, and he's got the looks and attitude to back it up. He looks and speaks like a pretty stereotypical, hard-boiled crime solver archetype, and pretty much the only thing that can soften his demeanor is his lovely daughter, Nanako, who's shy at meeting us. That's adorable. Persona 4 does this a lot, where it presents you with trope-filled characters, making you think that you already know what that character is going to be like, and for the most part, they kind of are like that, but not the entire time. On the way home from the train station, Dojima makes a quick pit stop at a gas station called Moel, where you make a quick chat with the attendant there, who's the first to tell you that there's to do in this sleepy town, and urges you to apply for a part-time job at the gas station, if for no reason other than to just pass the time. Making it to the Dojima residence, you get a spare room to unpack your stuff, and at family dinner, we see, for the first time, something that will happen again and again and again. Just when Dojima is ready to eat, his phone rings, and he's called out for work, leaving Nanako alone. This guy always gets called out for his job at like the worst possible moment. This is the first time we see it happen, and it's literally 10 minutes into the game. Maybe not even. Except this time, you're here to give Nanako some company. She turns on the TV, and in the local news, we get a story about a love triangle gone bad. Whoa! Here's a quick summary of that love triangle gone bad, because believe it or not, this will become important later. This story involves 3 people. Taro Namatame, city council secretary, his wife, enka singer Misuzu Hiragi, and a reporter working at the TV station we're watching right now, Mayumi Yamano. Basically, Namatame and Hiragi, despite being married, hate each other's guts and have denounced each other. Why they haven't divorced is unclear. And now Namatame has been caught having an affair with the reporter Yamano. This is a big deal because he's a government official cheating on a celebrity. So that's gonna hurt both of their reputations, which is why that's in the news to begin with. Hiragi now wants to pursue damages against Namatame because of this.
This is boring.
This is all the info we get before Nanako changes the channel, where an advertisement for the department store chain Juness is playing. Nanako loves Juness and the jingle that plays in their advertisement, and happily sings along.
Every day's great at your Juness.
That's adorable. There's really not much to say about Nanako at this point in the story. She's just a 6-year-old girl living with her father, going to school, nothing out of the ordinary really. Her only real hobby seems to be watching TV, and sometimes goes out to play with her friends. Now, as we learned shortly after, however, Nanako is actually very reliable for her age, able to cook sunny-side-up eggs and toast for herself, and can hang the laundry at age 6. Not bad. Now we can walk around the living room and discover that there's not much to do in here. You can save at the calendar, you can check the weather forecast at the TV, and check the fridge, where you'll occasionally find leftovers to eat that night, which can have a variety of effects, or find ingredients to cook with to eat the next day, making lunch that you can actually share with somebody. Your room is upstairs, and you're forced to go to sleep after this long and exciting day without much chance to do anything else. Don't worry, by the way, I'm not gonna describe every single event happening in the game to this extent. I want to finish this video while I still have hair, which I do have some under here, but it really ain't much. But there is a lot of stuff in this game. And especially at the start, there are a lot of things that need introducing. In your sleep, you have a very vivid, albeit short, dream. where you're walking forward through a thick fog that clouds your vision, with a strange voice interrupting you a few times. At the end, you reach a large door, and going through it, you're forced into battle against an opponent you can barely see. The strange figure notes that you can see a little bit, despite the fog, and that everyone else who stood where you now stand merely sees what they want to see. What? It's all very foreboding, but right now means nothing. And when the dream ends, a new day begins. On your way to the first day at your new school, another student on a bike crashes into a bunch of trash bins. The protagonist notes that the crash looked painful and keeps walking. This is the school you'll be attending for the next year, Yasogami High School. You're introduced to your class by your homeroom teacher, Kinshiro Morooka, who is a bona fide dickhead and the whole town knows it. Before you enter the room, the other students are lamenting that they have to put up with this guy for a full year. Safe to say, he's not very popular. A girl wearing green invites you to sit next to her, which you do, and the game skips time until class is out. How convenient. When an announcement is made over the speakers, all teachers are to gather in the faculty offices, and students are not to leave their classrooms. Some students are gossiping about last night's news about how Mayumi Yamano is supposedly in Inaba right now. We hear Green Girl talking to Red Girl about the thing that happens on rainy nights. Intriguing. Another announcement about how something has happened and police has been dispatched, and we can now go home. Green Girl and Red Girl now introduce themselves to us as Chie Satonaka and Yukiko Amagi, respectively. They want to walk home alongside the protagonist to get to know him a bit. How nice. No one ever did that for me. The student who crashed his bike earlier that morning reveals to Green Girl, I mean Chie, that he accidentally broke a DVD he borrowed from her and gets a swift kick in the balls for it. Chie is an energetic, spunky, tomboyish girl who is obsessed with kung fu movies, eating meat, and loves to exercise to clear her mind. Her catchphrase, if you can call it that, is "don't think, feel." She's bright, she's upbeat, and often trying to cheer up others. And while she can be short-tempered, she's fun to be around. Yukiko is the introvert to match Chie's extrovert. She's soft-spoken and reserved and was raised to be a prim and proper Japanese lady. That's because her family runs one of the most successful businesses in Inaba, the Amagi Inn, a traditional Japanese inn or ryokan. These two are the bestest of childhood friends. We will talk a lot more about these characters later, don't you worry about that. Outside the school, there's some creepy guy from another school who asks Red Girl, I mean Yukiko, out on a date, gets promptly rejected, and storms off. Weird. On the way home, we run into a street that's been blocked by the police and overhear that a dead body had been found, although we don't get more info right now. Dojima is at the crime scene doing what an investigator does, and we meet his textbook lousy detective trope assistant, Toru Adachi, a detective who throws up at the sight of a corpse. Dojima berates Adachi for a bit, and tells us to go straight home, so I guess we better do. Dojima isn't the kind of guy I would want to anger for no reason. At home, we see the news that the dead body we heard being found actually belonged to Mayumi Yamano, the TV reporter we saw on the news the other night. And the body was found hanging from a large television antenna atop someone's roof. Time and cause of death? Unknown. Thick fog seems to be slowing down investigative progress. The next day, the guy on the bike crashes into the bins again. And this time we help him and he introduces himself as Yosuke Hanamura. And he instantly starts talking about the murder from last night and starts theorizing. Yeah, fair enough, I guess it is a major event. Yosuke is actually a transfer student like you, having had to relocate to Inaba for his father's job as the store manager of the local branch of the Junes department store, which had its grand opening like a year ago or something, I'm not sure on that, where he actually takes you and Chie after school's out that day. Yosuke is kinda hard to describe in a brief manner. He can best be described as teenage boy. He's sometimes comic relief, he's kinda clumsy, a wannabe ladies man. He can be rude and spiteful, but he can also be cheerful and considerate. I'll jump ahead a little bit and tell you now that Yosuke is bored of life in Inaba and misses the beat of the city, often causing him to act a bit too rashly. Is that a word? Rashly. Jumping at anything that seems entertaining. And as we will later see, he is both smart and dumb. This guy is quintessentially 16 years old. At Junes, we meet Yosuke's crush, a girl named Saki Konishi, who works at Junes part-time. Her family, the Konishis, actually run a liquor store in Inaba's shopping district, but business has been slow ever since the all-too-convenient and affordable Junes came to town. We'll talk a lot more about Saki later. And this is where Chie also talks about something called the Midnight Channel, which is the thing she talks about with then Red Girl, now Yukiko, about the thing that happens on rainy nights. Intriguing. The rumor of the Midnight Channel goes like this. You're supposed to stare into a TV that's turned off. Doesn't matter if it's plugged in or not. Exactly at midnight when it rains. And you have to do it alone. And supposedly, if you follow these steps, another person will appear on the screen, and that person is your soulmate. That's the rumor of the Midnight Channel. Seeing as you have nothing to lose by trying it, you decide to give it a shot the next time it rains. On the news that night, we see an interview, quote-unquote interview, with the student who discovered Mayumi Yamano's body, a very poorly anonymized Saki Konishi. Whoa. By the way, quick interlude here, Persona 4 is infamous for having an absurdly long intro sequence. If you take the time to read the dialogue and watch the cutscenes, you're looking at a solid 2 to 3 hours before you're in control of what you can do. I'm fully aware of how long this intro is taking. Take my word for it, this is by far the longest stretch of uninterrupted main story that we're gonna get throughout the whole game, and most of this happens to be pretty important for us to understand everything that happens later. Just hang in there, I promise I have something interesting to say. Conveniently, it is raining that night, so you decide to try out this Midnight Channel thing. As we watch the animated cutscene, someone does in fact appear on the screen. The silhouette of a girl. As the flash of lightning illuminates the room, you hear in your head a commanding voice. I am thou, thou art I. Thou art the one who opens the door. Grab the keyblade. Inexplicably, the main character then touches the TV screen as though he's being guided by this voice, discovering he can stick his hand and later his head into the TV. Baffled and unsure if you're dreaming, you decide to go to bed for the night. The next day, you discuss your Midnight Channel viewing experience with Yosuke and Chie, and it appears that all three of you saw the same person. Intrigued. After some talk about TVs, the three of you go to the electronics department of Junes, a place we'll get quite familiar with before long, to have a look at some of the large modern flat-screen TVs. Here, you can demonstrate your ability to enter the TV to Yosuke and Chie. Bewildered, Yosuke almost pisses himself. Yes, that is a plot point, and when other customers are about to show up, they go full panic mode and the three of you fall completely into the TV. Like a Saturday morning cartoon. I'm not American. They don't play cartoons here on Saturday mornings. On the other side awaits an area filled with bright lights, metal catwalks and rafters, and so much fog that the party can barely see anything. With no exit in sight, they go exploring a bit. And no, you still can't control your character by this point. Eventually reaching a creepy-ass room with what looks like blood and splattered on the walls. Paint. A ton of posters of enka singer Misuzu Hiragi with their faces missing, looking like they've been clawed and ripped out in a frenzy of rage, and a noose made from a red scarf hanging from the ceiling with an upright chair right underneath it. Bro, this came out of nowhere. The very sudden, but appreciated, change in atmosphere is just as suddenly and with less appreciation reverted when Yosuke almost pisses himself. Again, still not having found an exit, you decide to go back to your starting point and try searching elsewhere. This is where we meet some bizarre creature that looks like a cartoon bear, who for some reason has the ability to bring us back to the real world, which it promptly does, thank goodness. He basically throws you out. Finally, back in Junes, you go home to rest. Dojima asks if you know something about a student named Saki Konishi, who's gone missing since we last saw her. And we also learned that the TV announcer Yamano had indeed been staying at the Amagi Inn immediately prior to her death. Now, the following day, every student is called to assembly in the school gym, where the headmaster makes the announcement that a student, Saki Konishi, has been found dead. In a rather dark yet absurdly realistic fashion, the headmaster seems predominantly concerned with whether Saki's death had anything to do with something his administration could get on the hook for, like bullying incidents they didn't notice or failed to stop. Yeah, dude just doesn't give a that his student got killed. Yosuke, devastated, comes up to you to ask if you want to go back into the TV world with him to go look for clues regarding Saki's death. You don't get a choice. Later at Junes, he gives you a golf club for a weapon, which looks like a driver from 30 years ago, and off into the TV you go. The bizarre bear creature from earlier shows up again, saying its name is Teddy. Of course it is. And he is suspicious of you because, according to him, someone has been throwing people in here. After agreeing to look for the culprit for him, he leads you to where Saki had ended up. Because yes, she was thrown in here. Teddy is a very divisive character. Some people love him, some people hate him. Either way, he's kinda annoying no matter which way you cut it. Persona 4 is an overall light-hearted game. In a stark contrast to its predecessor Persona 3 and mainline Shin Megami Tensei games. And a light-hearted experience isn't everyone's cup of tea, especially not amongst SMT fans. Much of the juvenile, childish silliness of Persona 4 comes from Teddy being part of the group dynamic. The fact that Teddy is the game's mascot and is paraded around everywhere definitely doesn't help in that regard. Yes, he's childish. Yes, he's naive. Yes, he's overly positive. All the things the internet hates. For now, Teddy is gonna serve as our navigator and exit provider. Yeah, he doesn't do much right now. He also gives you some glasses that let you see through the fog. What these glasses are, how he makes them, why only these specific glasses can look past the fog, is never explained, to my dismay. At the shadowy version of Inaba's shopping district that Teddy leads you to, when you get to the liquor store that the Konishi family owns, you're attacked by enemies called shadows. Defenseless and backed into a corner, the protagonist awakens to his superpower, something called person. I mean persona. There's a typo in my script. Yes, you awaken to a persona named Izanagi and defeat the 3 tongue ball shadows with extreme ease. Yosuke and Teddy are obviously baffled by this development, however there are more pressing issues at hand right now. Inside the liquor store, as well as briefly outside, we hear voices of what appear to be Saki's parents, as well as patrons of the store. Deeper in, we actually hear Saki as well, and all of these voices are lamenting that Junes is ruining the Konishi business. Saki's disembodied voice also goes on about how much she hates Yosuke and just put up with him because his dad is her boss. Yosuke is even more devastated than he was before, unsurprisingly. However, I have to mention that whether these are actually Saki's feelings or not is ambiguous, as it is not clear whether these words actually spawned from Saki when she was in the TV world, or if they've spawned from Yosuke's fear of this being true, since he's in the TV world right now. All that will make sense before too long. Just be aware that Saki may or may not have hated Yosuke. You're rudely interrupted by the cooler Yosuke, or Shadow Yosuke, a near exact copy of Yosuke in the form of a shadow, given away by its bright yellow eyes and deranged expression. It mocks the real Yosuke, saying that they're the same, and going on about how they really feel. Everything's a pain in the Everything bores him. He just wants to go back to the city. The only reason he plays pretend like he's cheerful and nice to be around is because he's scared of being alone. And finally, most if not all of the reason Yosuke was so eager to explore the TV world and solve the murders is because it sounds like a great time. He doesn't actually give a shit that Saki got killed. Never mind Yamano, whom he doesn't even know. The Saki incident just gave him an excuse to try and play hero, which sounds like a blast. The real Yosuke obviously denies all of this vehemently, repeatedly telling the shadow that took his form that they're not the same. Upon hearing this, the shadow Yosuke transforms into a massive frog beast thing with a wacky waving inflatable tube man riding it, and attacks the party. Well, I say party, but Yosuke's knocked out and Teddy can't fight, so you're on your own against the first boss of the game. Well, it's not so much a boss, but really more tutorials, teaching the player how to use weaknesses, reading a boss's patterns, and guarding when necessary. Although you can die here. I'll talk about combat gameplay a little later. I just want to get through this intro. We beat the shadow Yosuke frog demon with little trouble, making it revert back to its human Yosuke shadow form. Teddy comments about how that thing came from Yosuke, and he has to admit it or it'll just keep attacking. He does eventually accept that the shadow Yosuke wasn't lying, but he was too ashamed to admit that it may have been right, saying that it hurts to face yourself, telling it that you're me and I'm you. Remember what Saki's disembodied voice said earlier? My theory is that Yosuke isn't even worried that Saki might hate him. He wishes she would hate him, because he knows that he doesn't really like her or care about her all that much. Flirting with any cute girl is exciting to him. The prospect of a relationship, maybe not so much. Any cute girl would satisfy this lust for excitement. Like we see him flirting with Yukiko the day before we first meet Saki. He wants to care about Saki and do all this for her sake, but can't. Yosuke essentially admits that he's too busy with his own problems to be able to bring himself to really give it. And only by acknowledging and accepting this ugly truth can he attempt to change it in the future. The strength of heart required to face oneself has been made manifest. Yosuke has faced his other self. He has obtained the facade used to overcome life's hardships, the persona Jiraiya. There is a lot that just happened. What with shadows and personas and feelings, and I will explain, but I can't yet. After the battle, Teddy mentions that the shadows in the TV world were originally born from humans, and when the fog clears, they all go berserk. Yosuke correctly identifies that when it gets foggy in one world, the fog clears in the other, meaning that someone in the TV world will die if it gets foggy in the real world. Yeah? So, that means that in the event another person is thrown into the TV world, they could be saved by us finding them before the fog clears. We also need to enter the same TV every time if we want to come here, lest we end up somewhere where Teddy can't get to us and let us out. We'd be stuck in there. Now, out of the TV world and back at Junes, you remember that, oh yeah, Chie came along too and waited there with a lifeline. That didn't work. She beats you up a bit for worrying her, and you all go home exhausted but somewhat relieved. On your way home, you run into Yukiko, remember the red girl? And back home, it turns out Yukiko is on TV that night. Normal TV, not the midnight channel. Being swooned over by creepy-ass journos. What the f? Since it's still raining, the midnight channel should come on, and sure enough, when you check it, it does. And another figure appears on it, although it's too blurry to tell who it is. As a reminder, so far, I've been talking about Persona 4 pretty much as a new player would experience it. I haven't told you anything that you couldn't possibly know at this point in the game, which means I've been telling you some information that's not really correct. I'm not gonna tell you the correct info yet, but just as a reminder, don't believe everything you hear. You're summoned to the Velvet Room within your dream that night. You're given a velvet key to be able to enter here whenever you want while you're awake. Igor says that the Velvet Room will help you to hone your power. What that means isn't explained here, but I'll just tell you now to save on time. Chances are you'll be spending quite a bit of time in the Velvet Room over the course of your playthrough. Igor mentions that the Persona ability is the power to control one's own heart, and one's heart is strengthened through bonds with other hearts. Okay, your power is that of the Wild card, which has infinite potential and can hold multiple personas because you're super duper special like that. Now, what Igor said about bonding your heart with others is immediately demonstrated the following day, when on your way to school, you'll run into Yosuke again. He mentions how he can now also enter the TV the same way you can after gaining the persona power. Affirming each other's determination to find the culprit who's been throwing people into the TV, you feel a faint sense of friendship stirring your heart. And just like that, probably the biggest core feature of Persona 4 has been introduced to the player. The concept of social links, forming bonds with others in order to strengthen both yourself and your bond partner. I'll be talking about each social link in more depth as I believe it to become appropriate. There are a total of 23 social links in the game, all ranging from rank 1 to rank 10. Each rank is accompanied by a unique event or cutscene. By completing a social link and getting it to rank 10, you will unlock the ability to fuse the ultimate persona of that respective arcana. The way a social link works is it revolves around the story of a particular character that embodies in some way, shape, or form the arcana they represent. At lower ranks, your bond partner is misusing qualities of the arcana, making them flawed, and at higher ranks, they begin to overturn the qualities of that arcana when they work through the problems caused by it with your help, instead beginning to use it to their advantage and helping their personal growth. Or in other words, they start with problems, and we have to use our big boy words to help them turn those problems into a source of inner strength and use it to facilitate their growth as people. Now, some of these do have specific quirks, which we'll talk about when we get there. Each social link is assigned a major arcana of the tarot. Yes, arcana are tarot related. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. This is much like the personas in the game have. Every persona and every character has a arcana associated with it. Something like the magician, the hermit, the hanged man, the devil, you name it. Advancing a social link requires you to have gained enough relationship points, although how many you actually need is never told to the player. Throughout every rank of every link, you'll be presented with choices on what to do or what to say, and choosing the answer that your bond partner is most likely to want to hear in that moment will get you the most relationship bonus towards the next rank. Basically, if you hear this sound, you done good. There are a plethora of ways to get more relationship points. However, one thing almost all of these have in common is time. Time is easily your most valuable resource in Persona 4 if your goal is to get as many social links to a high rank as possible. So I've just mentioned quite a lot about tarot and arcana and all that. Somewhat needless to say, trying to pin down what each arcana represents can be a bit tricky, because tarot is entirely esoteric and doesn't have any solid hard rules, as far as I could tell. Talking about each individual arcana is something best kept to the social link discussions themselves, but I do want to at least briefly talk about tarot while we're on the subject. So tarot is a deck of 78 cards that is commonly used for divination and fortune telling. Luckily for me and for you, we don't need to know much of anything about real-world tarot and its history in order to understand what the Persona series uses it for. Now, of those 78 cards in a tarot deck, 22 are major and 56 are minor. Those 22 major cards are assigned to characters and personas, where the other 56 small arcanas, or minor, they only appear in a post-battle minigame inside dungeons. Tarot is a very prominent and recurring theme throughout the entire Persona series, being used to help define characters in various ways. This, with appropriate meta knowledge of tarot, will in theory help the player understand what a character might be like underneath the surface before getting to high ranks of a social link, which will in theory make maxing that link easier because you have a better idea of what answers you might want to pick. There is one more interesting thing about tarot in Persona 4, but we're not there just yet. Cut. to the crime scene, where Saki was found, where Dojima and Adachi are discussing the case and some potential perpetrators. It seems that Misuzu Hiragi has a solid alibi for both of these murders. Seeing as Yamano was involved, it would make sense to suspect people involved with that love triangle gone bad. But Misuzu Hiragi has a solid alibi, as does Taro Namatame. Basically, this cutscene exists to let us know that the police doesn't have the first clue as to what's going on here. Shame, really. This lighting effect is really cool and they only use it this one time. Wasted. That same night, Yukiko appears on the Midnight Channel in high definition, saying very out-of-character things, wearing a princess-like dress and running into a castle. What is going on? During your meeting with Yosuke the next day to discuss these proceedings, he starts waving around fake plastic weapons like the Chunin he is, and some cop sees him do it and both of you get arrested for it. What? At the police station, we're saved by Dojima, who scolds us a bit, and we pick up on some rumors that the Amagi girl has gone missing. We question Adachi about this, and sure enough, he runs his mouth and tells us that Yukiko is indeed being searched for by the police for more reasons than one. See, the police has no solid leads on this whatsoever, but they are suspecting people involved with the Amagi Inn as potential murder suspects, because apparently Miss Yamano, who had been staying at the Amagi Inn immediately before her death, is not a very nice person and said a bunch of shit to the manager's face, causing the manager, who is Yukiko's mother by the way, to collapse from stress. These establishments live and die on their reputations, so having your reputation slandered or having an overly aggressively negative guest can mean your business going downhill. It's understandable. Combine that with the hours that these people work, especially in hospitality of any kind. Yeah, the collapse makes a lot of sense when you think about it. The fact that Yamano died that same night might not be coincidence, you know? Quick fun fact. At one point during development, Yukiko was actually considered for the role of the culprit. I know that's technically spoilers, but yeah, it's not Yukiko. Or is it? Well, you'll have to keep watching to find out. And you have to subscribe. I won't tell you if you don't. You want to know who done it, don't you? Chie is waiting for us at the entrance and takes us to a strange store where we can buy weapons and armor in the middle of Inaba, and Chie insists that she comes along into the TV with us to look for the missing Yukiko. Teddy leads you to the same castle that was shown on the Midnight Channel, which turns out to be our first dungeon that needs to be explored. Chie runs ahead on her own, despite being unable to defend herself because she is panicking very hard. Once you enter any dungeon, the first thing you should check is what strategy your party members are set to. You can choose between a few different settings and let them auto-battle if you choose, but the intelligent gamer will always set all party members to direct commands, giving you full control over their actions in battle. Now we can quickly talk about gameplay in dungeons. It's very basic. Your goal in any dungeon is to reach the end. So on any given floor, you have to find the stairs, which can lead you up or down a floor depending on which dungeon you're in. Do this often enough, and eventually you'll arrive at the final floor, where you'll pass through a large set of doors and fight a boss. Beat the boss and you win. The layout of each floor is procedurally generated upon entry, which in 2008 was still kind of novel, believe it or not. There are a few special floors that have a fixed layout. Usually those will contain mini-bosses, cutscenes, or some kind of gimmick. During gameplay, there's only like 5 interesting things happening in dungeons. You got small chests, big chests, shadows, gold hands, and running into party members who are not in the active party, which I can't actually show here because the party's not large enough yet. Small chests contain somewhat useful items, but can also hide shadows inside. The big golden chests contain more useful items as well as equipment and won't ever have shadows inside, but require a chest key to open. Chest key is a general item, and any chest key from any source will work on any chest. Fucking hell, there's kids screaming outside like they're being impaled. What the? Someone's going to the dentist. Gold hands are a special rare enemy that is hard to catch and even harder to kill, certainly early on, but will drop tremendous amounts of XP and money upon defeat. And finally, once your party gets large enough, you can run into inactive party members in dungeons and talk to them. They'll give you a small item. How nice. And that's kind of it. Dungeons are basically a collection of long hallways and square rooms that have enemies and items in them. As far as gameplay goes, it's pretty rudimentary. There is one more interesting thing I can tell you about, though. See, the game keeps count of the amount of chests you've opened. After opening 21 total chests of either size, you will begin to hear ominous moaning and the rattling of chains. Something has found your presence, and now lies in wait for you to spring its trap. The entity will go away if you change floors, leave the dungeon, or don't take the bait. But if you now open a small chest that would have had a shadow lurking inside, you'll be prompted to think twice about whether you really want to open that chest. The navigator will tell you that there is something evil inside and that you really shouldn't open it. But should you do it anyway, you'll be attacked by this thing. This is the Reaper, one of the most dangerous enemies in the game, like top 3. This enemy is level 85 and has the second highest stat total of any single enemy in the game, and can use very strong attacks of all elements. His weakness is that he has pretty low max HP. The strategy here is to kill him before he kills you. Or if you're unsure whether you can take him on, just leave the floor. He's never gonna chase you, he simply waits for you to come to him. Which begs the question, why bother trying to kill this thing if it's that strong? Well, upon defeat, the Reaper will drop something very nice and shiny. You will get the best weapons and armor in the game as drops from him. But it's not random which one you'll get. Make sense? I hope it did. It's not like you'll have to do this anyway. Persona 4 is not a particularly difficult game, so you don't need the best gear. But if you want it, the Reaper has it. You'll always get the weapon for the protagonist as the first drop, the Blade of Totsuka. And that thing is fantastic. Really nice to have for the crit rate. Wait, what's that? Oh, combat? Oh, yeah, right. I never talked about combat. All right, okay, let's do it now while I'm on a roll. Okay, so combat is a fairly standard affair. If you've played any turn-based game before, you'll pick this one up immediately. The most important thing to know is that if the main character dies, it's game over. So protecting this guy is priority number 1. Combat largely revolves around hitting the enemy's weakness and protecting your own. Any given element can be resisted in one of 6 ways. Weak against, neutral, strong against, null, drain, and repel. There are 9 elemental types in the game, 7 of which can be exploited for weakness. Physical is used for basic attacks and has its own set of physical damage skills. These consume a percentage of your max HP to use rather than SP. Fire, ice, lightning, and wind are just different elemental magic attacks. Nothing special here. And then light and dark. These are special elemental magics that are one-hit KO. They have a low chance to hit, but if something gets hit, that thing's dead. Somewhat needless to say, you never want to be weak against either of these. And the other 2 not listed in this window are Almighty Element, which nothing is weak to but can't be resisted, and Ailment, which is different negative statuses like poison or panic. These are absolutely debilitating, but since no boss can be statused, they're pretty pointless to use. Exploiting enemy weaknesses is critical for success because hitting an enemy's weakness will give that character an extra move and knock the enemy down, making it take more damage while it's on the floor. If all enemies are knocked down at the same time, you can use an all-out attack, which does not use a turn and will deal big almighty element damage to all enemies. The crux of the system is that you don't know what each enemy is weak to until you hit them with that element. So a lot of battles are just gonna be trial and error until you hit the weak spot. And if an enemy hits your weakness, you'll be knocked down, and that enemy gets an extra turn. This can spiral out of control if you're not careful. Although luckily, enemies can't use all-out attacks on you. The stats here do what you would expect them to. Strength does more physical damage, magic does more magic damage, endurance makes you take less damage, agility pushes you up in the turn order and determines accuracy and dodge, and for once in an RPG, we actually know what the luck stat does. I think. Luck determines the odds of light and dark element magic connecting. Your insta-kills are more likely to hit, the enemies less likely. Luck also determines your critical hit rate. One last thing is stat buffs and debuffs, like Tarukaja, which increases your attack, or Rakunda, which decreases enemy defense. These skills are very good. Use them.
Use them.
Now, of course, some bosses are gonna have their own special moves and gimmicks, but that's pretty much all you need to know about combat. As stylish as it looks, it's very simple. Okay, so now that all that's out the way, we can continue with the story. Where even was I? Oh yeah, Chie stormed in by herself. How lucky for us that we find Chie on the second floor of this dungeon, listening to a disembodied voice belonging to Yukiko. Or does it? This voice goes on about how Chie's so great and is everything Yukiko wishes she could be, how worthless her life would be if Chie weren't there, and so on. This might be Yukiko's voice, but Yukiko isn't really speaking here. What's being said by this voice right now are the thoughts that Chie wants Yukiko to be thinking. Hence the Yosuke and Saki ambiguity from earlier. If this isn't really Yukiko, but rather something imposed on Yukiko by Shadow Chie, then in the liquor store, that probably wasn't really Saki, but rather imposed by Shadow Yosuke. Theoretically anyway. And then, holy sh... Shadow Chie shows up. Whoa, this shadow repeats more of the sentiment we just heard from Yukiko's voice, hammering home the fact that Chie has an inferiority complex of some kind. She thinks Yukiko is better than her in pretty much every way and is jealous of her to an unhealthy degree. Yukiko has a better upbringing, she's wealthier, more traditionally beautiful and feminine. All the boys want the red milkshake. Chie wants Yukiko to feel helpless if she isn't there by her side, making her feel like it gives her purpose and satisfaction. The shadow then says, I'm the one who can't do anything alone, and I'm pathetic, showing that Chie is at least somewhat aware of these issues crippling her potential to move past her complex. But she denies the shadow anyway, probably because people are watching. Boss. Shadow Chie's boss design is interesting, looking like a woman with gray skin in a yellow dominatrix getup with a banana hat, holding a whip in each hand, sitting atop a tower of human-looking girls wearing the Yasogami High female uniform, showing that she indeed can't stand on her own 2 feet and needs to prop herself up on others she, quote, holds onto with an iron grip to feel any kind of empowerment or confidence. What I do like here is the really long black straight hair. At least I'm pretty sure this is hair. This obviously resembles Yukiko's hair, and Shadow Chie uses it in an attack called Bottomless Envy, as a nod to Chie's jealousy of Yukiko's femininity or beauty. After the battle, Chie reluctantly accepts her shadow as part of herself and gains her persona, Tomoe. She collapses and the party decides to retreat for the time being, saying that the weather forecast is looking pretty safe. At this point, the protagonist is unanimously appointed the leader of this ragtag group, which starts a new social link. The Fool is a social link that ranks up automatically as you go through the main story, gaining ranks every time you make significant progress in the case. As it represents the investigation team as a collective rather than any individual character, I will not be talking about this link until way later. Chie later comes up to you and Yosuke to apologize, and her feelings of gratitude start another new social link, the Chariot. And with that, we have reached the end of the intro. Do you now see why it is infamous? As long as we save Yukiko from her predicament before the fog sets in, we can now spend our free time in the game as we wish. Persona 4 covers the range of time from April of 2011 to March of 2012, with most of that time being playable. I know the video is already quite long so far, and we've barely covered 1 week. But fear not, because with a lot of main story and explanations and introductions out of the way, and the game finally letting me out of the intro sequence prison cell, it's about to speed up quite a bit. However, some pretty big explanations I've been teasing still remain ungiven. Now it's about to get interesting. So if you've been paying attention in between your woodcutting runs. I don't play RuneScape. You may have noticed that there's quite a lot more going on with this game than you're initially told. And indeed, pretty much every part of Persona 4 is riddled with symbolisms and layered metaphors to the point where it can be hard to follow even if you have a pretty good idea of what different things are supposed to represent. All of this is knowledge that you would gain gradually over the course of the game, as some mysteries slowly become clearer to both the player and the party. However, in order to make sense of the game and what it has to say, and in order for me to really explain myself in what I'm gonna say, I need to explain some of those mysteries now. This will be a big spoiler warning. Spoilers ahead. Immediately following this bit, I'm gonna start talking about a topic that's pretty much gonna give it away. If you're at all interested to see where the story is going and want to play the game for yourself, I strongly urge you to play it rather than watch me talk about it. This is a story worth experiencing for the first time, okay? So we're gonna continue after this countdown, and if you're leaving here, then don't forget to subscribe. Alright, so first, allow me to finally mention the elephant that has been in this room since the second time we entered the TV. The psychological findings of one Carl Jung. Carl Jung, born in 1875, was a Swiss psychiatrist, psychologist, and psychotherapist. Damn. Findings and terms coined by Jung are so prominent that some of them are just commonly used words now. Complex, archetypes, extrovert, introvert, and of course, persona and shadow. You know that Myers-Briggs personality test, those funny 4 letters that if you see in someone's bio, you really shouldn't talk to them? That whole thing is, albeit loosely, based on psychological types attributed to Jung. This school of psychological thought and practice is known as analytical psychology, a generalized method of investigating archetypes and the unconscious, something I read on Wikipedia. I was really dreading having to talk about psychology here, but luckily, the game actually does a lot of explaining for me. See, Persona 4 the Golden has some extra stuff in it, and one of those is a series on Jungian psychology, presented by Mr. Edogawa of Gekkokan High School, a character from Persona 3 that we will also briefly meet later. In this 10-lesson program that you'll unlock as you play through Persona 4's story, Edogawa essentially outlines all the bits of Jungian psychology that are important for us to know for giving context to Persona 4 and its concepts. Edogawa is a goofball, by the way. Like, he's the school nurse at Gekkokan, but has extensive knowledge on religion, occultism, and mysticism of many kinds, and evidently on psychology too. I can never tell if he's just really knowledgeable or a complete hack. In the first lesson, he randomly sprinkles into his introduction the words Pallas Aron Asinomas, which, according to the book Dictionary of Satanism by Wade Baskin, something which you can go and read on the Internet Archive right now, is an ancient formula for invoking a demon. Yeah, he's odd, but worth listening to. So I didn't really make this clear enough, but the way I'm about to explain this to you is the same way that it is explained in the game. The reason I'm not mentioning certain things is because they're either not brought up in Mr. Edogawa's program, or because I believe them to not be important enough to waste your and my time with. The lecture begins with personas and shadows. According to Jung, they are other yous inside yourself. A persona being the other you that comes out when you interact with others. When you talk to someone, is that the real you? Or was that the version of you that your conversation partner was expecting? Was it a version of you that you want other people to see over and above the real you? Any of those are a persona. In its most basic form, personas are different masks you wear when interacting with the world and people around you. This can be done consciously or unconsciously. But shadows are other yous that you reject. They are a side of you that you keep under lock, away from the outside world where other people could see them. A shadow can be any part of you that, according to your moral compass, you deem unfit to show others. Most of the time, you aren't even aware of your own shadows, or your personas, in fact. But why is that, I hear you ask? Well, it's because both of these things live inside your unconscious, a part of the mind that you're typically unaware of. Basically, the part of your mind that is aware of itself thinking thoughts is the ego. Memories that you have that you can recall on command are in the conscious mind. Everything that you aren't aware of thinking is the unconscious mind, okay? Now, the unconscious mind is said to be much bigger than the conscious. I didn't do a good job with this graphic, so it's only slightly bigger, but it's said to be much bigger. Are you with me so far? Okay, great. Now, this next bit gets a little esoteric, but for the purpose of Persona 4 at least, we can assume it to be true. The idea that all human minds are connected, transcending space and time. Everyone's unconscious is shared in something called the collective unconscious, kind of like a computer being part of a network. There's always stuff being uploaded and downloaded and shared, but you're never really aware of it happening and you don't even know that there's a network. Now, Jung's research into all of this is something he did in an effort to find the cause of mental illness. His observations led him to think that mental illness was actually caused on the conscious side of the mind. When you knowingly suppress your emotions too tightly, or work too hard, or stress yourself to your limits, the unconscious mind, where a lot of the bad shit is stored, takes over all of the mind in an effort to balance itself, acting like a kind of failsafe. A failsafe that comes with baggage. Now, all of this begs the question of how the unconscious is even formed to begin with. There must be some kind of process through which it is created. Basically, as people live their lives, they experience many things, but it's not like they remember everything that ever happened to them. There are memories, good and bad, right? Things you want to remember and things you want to forget. It's the piling up of those memories that you've forgotten or suppressed that forms the unconscious. When Jung eventually got to the conclusion that man's unconscious must be shared, it made the whole thing look a bit like this, okay? He observed patients telling of scenery they'd never seen, events they'd never experienced or that just never happened, and one particular patient's delusion was very similar to an uncommon foreign myth that at the time that patient couldn't possibly have known about, leading Jung to the conclusion that man's unconscious is shared, right? I'm paraphrasing and summarizing all of this, just to be clear. And also, we're at like lesson 3 out of 10, by the way. Next, archetypes. The idea of the archetype is the central theory to Jungian psychology. And unfortunately, I don't understand it very well. See, archetypes in the Jungian sense of the word are what allows for pattern recognition. The collective unconscious is made up of archetypes, as you can see here. There are, in theory, limitless archetypes. The example given here is the archetype of wise old man. When I say to you the words, wise old man, what mental image does that conjure in your brain? It probably incurs the mental image of an old man with a long gray beard, and it probably has some properties associated with it like knowledgeable, teacher, mentor, quiet, something like that. And each one of those properties can be its own archetype in and of itself, okay? With me so far. All of those archetypes, i.e. mental images with properties, are stored in the collective unconscious for everyone to use, being refined and expanded as time goes on, which allows you to take something you've never seen or heard of before and put it into certain categories, even if you have no idea what it is that you're looking at. So if you think of something like Lovecraftian horror, right? Unimaginable being. You could look at something like Cthulhu and without knowing what in God's name that thing is, surmise that it's probably dangerous because it shares properties with other things you know to be dangerous. So in short, Jungian archetypes are the very base layer of the mind that allows for the ability for a human to observe and understand the physical world by enabling pattern recognition. God, I hope that's mostly correct. So, still with me? Cool, good. Now, next, the name Shadow. Shadow is given as a name to the archetype that represents the undesirable, as the part of the personality one chooses not to see. It represents things you don't wish to be, things you hate. However, it's important for your shadow to exist because it makes you recognize yourself and gives your value judgments meaning. The things your shadow represents are things that you, in your moral compass, have deemed to be evil or undesirable, meaning the opposite of those things must be good and desirable. The simple act of knowing what you hate expands your thinking. By being aware of what you don't want to be, it gives you a clearer picture of who do you want to be. To erase or ignore one's shadow is to weaken one's mind. But by accepting one's shadow, a person's mind can grow further. Next, the persona archetype. The persona archetype can best be thought of as the ability to play a role in society. In a society. The persona is a mask that your ego wears. It plays a role in social interaction and acts as a mediator between you and others. We are able to engage with and be part of society by using a persona to fill a role. But that also means that society doesn't really need you. They just need someone to fill the role you play. In a twisted kind of way, using a persona means denying your real self so that you can survive in a society. By deliberately denying yourself individuality, it makes life quite a lot easier for both yourself and people around you. Wearing a mask that doesn't fit you will, however, become a burden. Spending too much time playing a role, you start to forget who you are when you take the mask off. So a persona can be useful in getting you through life, but there's the danger of it weakening or even overtaking your mind. It is said that the ideal relationship between the ego and the persona is the one where the ego controls the persona. Okay? In other words, as long as you're in control of what mask you choose to wear when, and when to take all the masks off, you're okay. I love the way this silly little video game fosters introspection. It's great. Now right here should be something about the animus and anima. However, I will explain that particular concept later. Now, the self, according to Jung, encompasses the ego, the conscious, and the unconscious. So basically, the self is the psyche as a whole. Now, Jung describes this as, quote, "The self embraces ego consciousness, shadow, anima, and collective unconscious in indeterminable extension. As a totality, the self is therefore bright and dark and yet neither." End quote. Basically, being aware of everything about yourself, good and bad. Your past and your present, your nature and your nurture, and so on. The big idea here seems to be that you can't be whole if you're unaware of parts of yourself. That's any part of yourself. Now, realizing the self or pursuing one's true self is really a journey of understanding yourself and your tendencies. It goes beyond what you can think about consciously or put into words. It's really more about observing yourself. How do you know if you're there? I don't know, don't ask me. Some things, like the self, can't be stated or defined on an individual level. They can only be understood and felt. This does, however, beg the question of, well, now how exactly is one supposed to get there? The answer seems to lie in something called individuation. This is a process of integrating various aspects of personality into the self. Oh, fuck it, I'm gonna quote Wikipedia here because I really can't say it any better. In the Jungian sense of the word, quote, "Individuation is a process that involves going through different stages of growing awareness through the progressive confrontation and integration of personal unconscious elements." End quote. Basically confronting all the stuff you suppress in a controlled manner. Now, as far as I understand, this is not a process that can be finished. You can only ever get closer to it, but never quite reach it. Like that one thing in math, what's it called?
People going inside a TV?
I looked it up. It's called an asymptote. That's because as you go through life, you always suppress new things or resuppress old. So you can never finish your journey of self-realization. For such is the burden of the human condition. Now, worth noting that Jung said that individuation is different from individuality. The self and individuality are different things. All right? And finally, I want to talk about what helped Jung formulate his theories. That being his interest in the mystical, which today we would call the occult. See, Jung's father was a pastor, and his mother was, quote, from a bloodline that can sense spirits, end quote. In fact, Jung had a cousin who was a medium, and Jung, as a boy, participated in a gathering to summon the spirits of the dead. Safe to say, this environment helped foster in him an interest in religion and the spiritual. It was through many of his own experiences that he became interested in the study of the mind. Later in his life, he would keep his interest in mythology and the occult, and studied a whole bunch of different things, from Hindu philosophy to Chinese fortune-telling, and probably most prominently alchemy. He wrote quite a few books on alchemy. But what I want to talk about is his relation to tarot. Yeah, tarot. Remember that there was something left to say with regards to tarot? It's this. And it turns out it's really not very much. During some research I did, my assumption that Jung studied tarot and used tarot cards as part of his psychoanalysis procedure turned out to be pretty wrong. There seems to be no evidence that Jung used tarot cards for his work, having never mentioned it in any of his writings. But allegedly, in a 1933 lecture Jung gave, he spoke at length about tarot, and while not a direct focus of his, he, quote, recognized tarot as depicting archetypes of transformation like those he had found in myths, end quote. As well as, quote, a person could use an intuitive method to understand, through tarot's reflecting of the collective unconscious into a cloud of cognition, the meaning in a present prevailing condition, end quote. What? So the way I understand this is that if someone at a point in their life chooses to turn to tarot as a means of understanding their condition or situation, if they can intuit meaning from what they see in the archetypes that the cards are representative of, maybe they should take that meaning and run with it. Boy, after all that, I'm really scared of reading these comments. So, to recap, the mind exists in 3 layers: conscious, unconscious, and collective unconscious. The first 2 are personal. The third one is shared between all humanity. Your brain, actively thinking thoughts and making decisions, lives up there and is called the ego. Archetypes used for pattern recognition live down here and make up the baseline of our understanding of and interaction with reality. And personas and shadows live right here in the middle. Personas being other forms of you that come out when you interact with others, basically masks for you to wear to help you get through life. And shadows are the opposite of that, being other forms of you that you reject and keep locked away. They're still part of you, but you kind of wish they weren't. Once a shadow is processed into the ego, it can stay a shadow there or become a persona. And that persona is then shown to the outside world. Okay, mind you that all of this is merely scratching the surface of the analytical psychology of Jung, and I'm not gonna pretend like I know more, or even this, but for Persona 4, this is more than enough for us to really understand what's going on here. Allow me to explain what all this means for Persona 4, using the example of Yukiko and her dungeon. A lot of things that we went over earlier will now be made clearer. I will, of course, revisit Yosuke and Chie after the Yukiko segment, but it wouldn't make sense to do it right now, since too many parts of the gameplay loop are missing from both. But first, What actually happens in Yukiko's castle? On the second floor, in the same area where we fought Shadow Chie on our last visit, we run into Shadow Yukiko, who exclaims she is going to hunt for her Prince Charming, befitting her princess attire. She doesn't seem to mean this in a hunting game kind of way, more in a hide-and-go-seek kind of way. Then, literally materializing in thin air is a billboard, like a TV program announcement or advertisement. Princess Yukiko's hunt for her Prince Charming. Then on the 5th floor, you run into her again, where she sicks a mini-boss on you, implying during her dialogue that her prince could be among your party, stating that I am but a trapped soul, unable to leave this place even if I wished. The mini-boss is susceptible to ailment. If you put panic on him, he is stun-locked into eternity. Fun fact, on the top floor, she calls all 3 of you princess, excluding poor old Teddy. She wants to be taken to a land far, far away, where no one knows her. She then goes on to rant about how Chie was someone who helped her, but since Chie can't take Yukiko away from here, she's useless after all. Yukiko seems to see her heritage as little more than chains. The inn, her prospects of taking over as the manager, she laments that everything's decided for her, passing her over. I have no hope if I stay and no courage to leave. These points are hammered home a little more before the real Yukiko tells her shadow self that no, you're not me, causing it to change forms. Boss. Shadow Yukiko takes the form of a massive red bird with Yukiko's face, weird, sitting in a birdcage situated on top of a chandelier with lit candles. She has strong fire magic, can inflict fear, and that's kind of it. She actually does summon another enemy called Charming Prince later into the fight. Look at this goofy little fella. He can silence and, weirdly enough, can't be crit. Something I didn't know was a property enemies have in this game. But yeah, he's pretty useless overall. When he gets low enough, he actually runs away. After he runs, Shadow Yukiko attempts to resummon him, but he doesn't come. Overall, not a hard boss as long as you make Chie guard when Burn to Ashes is used because she's weak to fire. Yukiko accepting that she wants to run away and desires for someone to save her, and admitting to Chie that she was blinded by looking for an easy way out, moves those feelings into her ego, where she can actively face them and think about them. Through the resolve to change, she gains the persona Konohana Sakuya. Now, let's explain some stuff. Spoiler warning, last call. There will not be another. I'm about to tell you directly what a lot of stuff in the game is, and it will ruin your first-time experience. Please like and subscribe. Okay, here we go. The world inside the TV that the party can access is the collective unconscious. Note what I just said. It doesn't represent the collective unconscious, it is the collective unconscious within Persona 4. Meaning that, while technically this place only exists within people's hearts and minds, it is a real, tangible, physical space that you go to. Say, for instance, items and equipment you find in dungeons. Yeah, those are real. You can take them out of the TV and back into Inaba to trade to people or sell to stores. Die in the TV, die in real life. It's not all in Lahed, okay? But rather a real place, molded and shaped by Lahed. The Midnight Channel, however, is a phenomenon geographically restricted to Inaba, hence, presumably, the ability to enter TVs as well. On that same note, the Midnight Channel. Why exactly the Midnight Channel only comes on at rainy midnights? I don't know. I have speculations, but let's not talk about that here. The Midnight Channel, very simply, is a window into the world inside the TV. What is displayed on there is just a portion of human consciousness that seems to be of particular interest. How it picks which part of the world to show, again, I don't know. It seems to follow any person within the TV. This is jumping ahead a lot, but when someone appears on normal television, enough people see it to where a faint silhouette of that someone is formed in the collective unconscious, signaling to the player that the masses are curious about that person. They've turned into a figure of public interest and, for better or worse, are assigned an archetype based on what the masses can see. When the image goes from a silhouette and static to a clear image with audio, it usually signals that that person has entered the TV world. Throughout the game, all of the Midnight Channel cutscenes that have clear images of the person are of that person's shadow. In later rescues, sometimes you're not gonna know where their dungeon has spawned and can't get to them. Finding the dungeon requires that you gather more information about whoever's stuck in the TV. In all of those instances, you always seem to be looking to find what the person's issues are, what kind of complexes they have. The reason for that is because the dungeons themselves are materializations of the respective person's dreams and desires and complexes, twisted into something barely recognizable by mixing with the archetype they've been assigned by the collective unconscious, or in the collective unconscious by the masses. Cool. Let's take all of this so far and relate it to Yukiko. Okay, so the TV world being a real place means that if Yukiko isn't rescued in time, she will wind up dead and somehow be transported back to the normal world. Remember her appearing on TV the other night with the creepy-ass journos? That TV show seems to have sparked enough interest from the masses to make Yukiko's silhouette appear on the Midnight Channel. After she entered the other world, the image became clearer. Her shadow self now able to fully manifest in there. And that's what is shown on the Midnight Channel. We don't need to investigate who Yukiko is since we have Chie with the rescue team. Her presumably knowing enough about Yukiko and her problems to be able to lead us to her with the help of Teddy. Yukiko's dungeon itself is very creatively named Yukiko's Castle. That's all well and good, but why a castle? We're in a rural Japanese town. Where is this European castle coming from? And why is her shadow dressed and acting like a horny cartoon princess? Remember, the dungeon is created by mixing the assigned archetype with the actual person's dreams and desires. And this also applies to that person's shadow. Remember at the start of the video, I said something about how I'll purposefully tell you wrong information? I've been telling you some information that's not really correct. Don't believe everything you hear, because the correct information is spoilers. This is what I was talking about. The shadow, somewhat needless to say, is a representation of their suppressed feelings. Something they feel but have to or want to keep hidden. Now, according to a developer interview in the Persona 4 Golden Premium Fanbook, which is official extended media guide, I guess, Atlas defines shadows by the Jungian description, but also, and very importantly, mentions that the shadow selves of people you meet in the game are exaggerated versions of what they feel. They call this an alternate possibility. My understanding of this is that if you were to give in to or even embrace your suppressed negative feelings without trying to keep them in check in some way, the shadow selves we meet in the game are the person you would become if you did that. They represent a conclusion of what would happen if you gave in to your negative instincts. They do not necessarily represent what that person feels right now. This also is then mixed with their assigned archetype. I've kept this info from you so far because it is spoilers. You can figure this out on your own by engaging with the characters and trying to understand them, but it's never explicitly stated anywhere in the game. The particular archetype assigned to Yukiko by the masses can be understood as something called Yamato Nadeshiko. This is a term meaning the personification of an idealized Japanese woman. Something I read on Wikipedia, making Yamato Nadeshiko an established archetype already that Yukiko seems to happen to fit into. The archetype itself containing properties like femininity, traditional, beauty, grace, dignified, modest, amongst many others. It also, interestingly, is associated with a few physical characteristics, namely long, straight black hair, clear, pale skin, and wearing feminine clothing, often kimono. They're generally seen as strong on the inside and mentally resilient, but overall submissive in demeanor. Fun fact, this entire concept was actually invented as a means of propagandizing women during wars. Like, hey lady, your husband's a soldier fighting for his nation. You should look very pretty and agree with everything he says to motivate him to come back home alive. Oh, and also you should keep a halberd or other pointy object within arm's reach at all times. You know, just in case. Yeah, the halberd was part of the archetype too. Now, the strange workings of the TV world seem to take this archetype and mix it with Yukiko's suppressed feelings, creating a princess. Yukiko's suppressed feelings being predominantly that she does everything for the inn. She lives there, she works there, she trains there to be the next manager. But she does all of this because she feels forced to, being born into the Amagi family. Deep down, Yukiko wishes she wouldn't have to take over the inn someday, feeling like her life has been predetermined from birth, and being robbed of the freedom of choice that she has come to crave. The reason she suppresses all this is for a reason I mentioned quite a bit earlier. She cannot be seen as ungrateful or selfish. Look, she's effectively born into success and wealth, blessed with beauty and intelligence. There is no shortage of people who would kill to be in her position. If she started complaining about anything, it would look very, very bad because she has everything one could possibly want. She feels helpless and defenseless, deluding herself into thinking she's accepted this fate she doesn't want. But in her shadow, we can see that she clearly hasn't accepted it. Her desire seems to be for someone to come along to rescue her from her predicament. Someone she can effectively elope with or run away with and never turn back, feeling too scared to go through with this plan by herself. This helplessness and desire is taken to its twisted conclusion with her shadow self. Someone who would live for their savior, doing anything they want, telling them anything they want, as long as you help me get out of here because I'm too useless and cowardly to do it alone. So, you have the Yamato Nadeshiko, the perfect Japanese woman. Being mixed with all the things I've just described, you get a princess, someone who was born into nobility, has to look and act a certain way, always listen to what she's told, and never complain about any of it. All for the sake of crest and kingdom. She herself doesn't matter. Waiting and hoping for her prince to take her away from all this. And where do princesses live? That's right, in castles. That's also a reference to her surname, Amagi, which translates to Celestial Castle. I read that on the Megaten wiki. Now, back to the explanations for a bit. The astute player may have noticed at this stage that the fog is representative of the truth being clouded. Truth being the core theme and central element of Persona 4, more so than anything else. The fog represents lies, deceit, rumors, jumping to conclusions, gossip, sensationalism and conspiracy, and really anything that serves to either hide the truth directly or distract you from it, divert your attention from it. So what's up with the glasses? They let you see through the fog? That's neat. Teddy makes them. Don't ask me how though. I'm like 95% sure that giving everyone glasses, but only in the TV, is like 95% a stylistic choice by the dev. They also serve an important purpose in some cutscenes much later. The only thing I got is that Teddy always hands these out to people in the same moment that they join the investigation team, probably being symbolistic of their determination to not let their vision be clouded on their search for the truth, and as physical identification that they're part of the group now. The nondescript voices you occasionally hear in dungeons, like the cheering and some murmurs, they come from the inner thoughts of Inaba residents, reflecting their reactions to the programs that are shown on the Midnight Channel. They're not the actual voices of the audience, but rather a general impression of how the people of Inaba react to these broadcasts. Cheering, for instance, when Shadow Yukiko says she's gonna find a prince for herself, ooh, but they're murmuring and gossiping all the while. Next, the shadows you fight in dungeons. I'm talking regular enemies here, okay, trash mobs. It would stand to reason that any and all of these enemies in some way represent commonly suppressed feelings, seeing as they're shadows, you know. However, I really can't make sense of that. Like, look at this, from the Gigas family of shadows. I don't think Hulk Hogan is a commonly suppressed feeling. And what is this? And what is this? It seems that small shadows are only shadows in name. According to Persona Club P4, a book written by Atlas released in 2009, the designs for some of the shadows are caused by the people of Inaba tuning in to watch the Midnight Channel. The people's thoughts as they watch flow into the TV world, which influences the appearances of small shadows. So whatever's on the viewer's mind at that moment somehow makes its way into the TV world. They had to have regular encounters somehow and wanted to make cool-looking enemies, so, you know, well, fair enough. Now, there is the question of the Reaper, however. The Reaper is not a small shadow, neither is he a shadow self of anyone in particular. So what is it? Well, the Reaper is said to be a kind of security system for areas where shadows infest. It appears in Persona 3 and 5 as well. He protects the shadows and removes lingering threats. Like you, repping the Death Arcana, I think he's supposed to represent people's inherent fear of death that always lurks in the depths of the mind. But I don't know. We never learn anything concrete about this thing. I also want to talk about why shadows go berserk to begin with. Shadows going into a berserk state where they attack anything in sight when the fog clears is something repeatedly brought up in the intro sequence of Persona 4, since that determines your deadlines for rescue attempts, right? The reason shadows do this is because they don't want the fog to go away. They're happy to live in their delusions, right? Being forcefully confronted with any form of truth aggravates the shadows. Anything that isn't a shadow and isn't shrouded in fog will be killed until it is dead. And finally, the boss itself. The shadow selves of characters always change into their boss forms after being told that you're not me. This is the equivalent of them going berserk and attacking you, since they have just been confronted with the truth. They are not the same. Like I said, the shadow selves and their demeanor is an alternate possibility for the character that has not yet happened. It is built on a real foundation of real suppressed feelings, but is an exaggeration of a conclusion that has not yet happened. But it could. That's like the entire point. Ergo, you're not me is true, and they don't like that very much. After they're beaten back, they revert to their form that resembles the character they're copying, standing upright. They can't be defeated with strength alone. Accepting these suppressed feelings that underlie their shadow self, the character then gains a persona. The shadow has moved from their unconscious into their ego and has become a persona through a willingness to change it. Expanding the ego weakens the shadow, okay? Basically, by keeping the aspects of their personality that they view as negative or undesirable in their conscious thinking, they can actively make decisions on what to do with it, giving you control. Facing your bad parts is a mandatory step on the journey to self-realization, right? And when done with care, it will make you stronger. A persona is a mask you wear to help you get through life and through social interactions. So a persona being born from a shadow means that parts of the shadow are still in there. They don't just disappear. But what matters is being in control of it, you see? Say, for instance, a part of yourself that you view as undesirable and suppress is that you have a tendency of being mean and aggressive when pushed. Well, once you're aware of that, think about it. Is that really such a bad thing in every conceivable circumstance? Because I'd wager it isn't. If it really is a facade used to overcome life's hardships, facade, something you can take on and off whenever, well, I can imagine quite a few circumstances in which acting mean and aggressive will overcome hardships. It might not be pretty, but it will overcome it. So, to summarize this in the shortest possible way I can think of, a persona is good because it gives you control, where a shadow is bad because it takes control from you. Okay? So we're not done with Yukiko's castle just yet. I want to quickly talk one more thing. The boss design of Shadow Yukiko. The symbolism of this boss design is very frequently mocked as being incredibly on the nose, and therefore bad symbolism. Now, if you're at all familiar with Persona 4 and its history online, you've definitely seen the memes and comics about how
It's symbolic.
and that mockery, while it was always inevitable, I think is largely unjustified. It just so happens to be the first big boss, something that leaves an impression, right? The symbolism being obvious does not make it bad. Yes, she feels helpless and stuck, like a bird in a cage, but the cage has been open the whole time. You can leave if you want, door's open. And look, when she casts a spell, she quickly retreats into the cage and then bursts the door open again. There's even a lock on the side. Yes, of course, it's obvious. But do you remember the first time you were confronted with this idea that you're not as stuck as you think you are? Like, what is actually stopping you from doing what you want to do? Figure out a way. I'd wager that if you have a brain in your skull and you're not completely league-pilled, it probably got you thinking. This hits pretty hard for a lot of people, whether they're confronted with it in Persona 4 or someplace else. Having something to lose will inevitably create the feeling in you that you're stuck. As symbolism goes, this is a very good one. Anything that facilitates thinking thoughts is good in my book. Sorry about the rant, but I grow weary of the notion that something is bad just because you've seen it before. You're too content-pilled. Uninstall League of Legends. Right. Moving on. After the battle, we get Yukiko out of the TV and make a pit stop at Junes to talk. She says she doesn't remember anything about how she got in there. Okay, fair enough, it's probably pretty traumatic. The party theorizes a bit, and this is where Yosuke shows that he's actually pretty f***ing smart sometimes, having figured out what the shadows are. He can't confirm this, however, leaving it as a theory for now. Chie takes Yukiko home, and the group parts ways for the day. When Dojima comes home, turns out he has Adachi in tow, who tells you that Yukiko Amagi has been found safe and sound. Hooray for the Inaba PD. He runs his mouth and tells us that in their questioning of Yukiko about, where she's been, has she been abducted and all that, she hasn't spilled any of our TV superpower beans. Now, Adachi finds this whole thing pretty fishy, but Dojima slaps him over the head for running his mouth before you all sit down for dinner. This ends the Yukiko Castle segment. However, while all the happenings are still fresh in our memory, let's talk about the Yukiko Amagi social link, the High Priestess. See, this link doesn't actually start until around halfway into May, but it would be remiss of me to talk about it at any other point in the video. See, social links in Persona 4, they follow a general template in most instances, surrounding their corresponding arcana. Each arcana in the tarot has certain personality traits or properties that it represents or is otherwise associated with. Not too different from the Jungian archetype. In tarot, every card used can be in the upright or in the reversed position. Upright usually means positive, and reversed usually means negative. Social links effectively start with the character and their character quirks and their personality traits stemming from their arcana in the reversed position. And each rank gained is like a tick in making that card upright again for that character. Or in other words, they start with problems, and we have to use our big boy words to help them turn those problems into a source of inner strength and use it to facilitate their growth as people. Now, the High Priestess Arcana can be broken down to represent divine wisdom and basically listening to one's instincts. Do you have a hunch about something? A gut feeling, perhaps? Well, the priestess says maybe you should listen. In reverse, it usually means that you've lost touch with yourself. You don't know what you really should do. Maybe that gut feeling you had? There's a good chance it's wrong. It's all about introspection and taking some time to listen to yourself, lest you act too rashly. I still don't know if that's a word. And Yukiko reps this very well. The link begins with Yukiko telling us that she's made up her mind about leaving Inaba after graduating. She refuses to inherit the Amagi Inn. Whoa, taking what her shadow self said in the castle at face value. Most of the middle is her dragging us around shopping for supplies that she needs to study and learn to cook for herself. See, Yukiko is an awful awful cook and wants to practice so that, she can feed herself once she's on her own. Towards the end, she keeps getting pestered by the same gross TV crew from the intro who want to milk the inn for all its sensationalist worth, like the slimy bastards they are. Yukiko realizes that she actually cares greatly about the inn and its reputation, and the people who work there, who have all been there to support her in learning how to cook along this journey. So she tells the TV crew to piss off by hitting them where it hurts, in the wallet. She literally is threatening them with a complaint to their sponsor, telling them that that TV station they work for is a brand risk. That's the plot. And she finally reaches the conclusion that deep down, she doesn't want to leave the inn after all. She's happy at the inn, she loves the staff, and she cares greatly for them. But she was blinded by her anger that her life was on rails, rejecting the inn more out of principle than out of actual honest desire to do so. The desire for freedom to be able to live her life how she chooses has overshadowed everything else, making her unable to see what's right in front of her face. And now, knowing that she had freedom of choice all along, chooses to continue her training of her own volition. The lesson here being that knee-jerk responses won't get you very far. Reject your programming. Observe, consider, then make a choice. Now, while we're talking about a party member, let's also talk about the others so far, starting with Chie. Chie and Yukiko and their characters throughout the main story are closely tied together. Just to quickly reiterate on her Shadow Self encounter. Shadow Chie shows active animosity and contempt towards Yukiko rather than just jealousy, and wants to use Yukiko almost like a tool to derive her own satisfaction from. I mentioned earlier about how this is how Chie really feels, but that was to trick you. As we now know, the Shadow Selves represent alternate possibilities. Meaning that if Chie went and embraced her jealousy of Yukiko, her shadow is the kind of person she would become eventually. Now, Chie's arcana is that of the Chariot, number 7, and generally meaning having a goal and pursuing it no matter what's in your way, strength in the face of adversity, but also running the danger of justifying your stubbornness and narrowed vision as determination. They act on impulse. But if the thing they're chasing is something that can't be reached by going with their gut, they run into trouble. Okay? The Chariot always has to move forward, which is good only for as long as you have any fucking clue where you're even going. Now, Chie's social link is much like Yukiko's, kickstarted by focusing on what her shadow self said to her. She's taken a kind of vow to overcome her inferiority complex, but doesn't seem to know where to start. Throughout her arc, Chie and the protagonist do physical training together. That seems strange. A complex is not something that can be overcome by practicing your kicks. But Chie has to move forward right now and all the time. So she defaults back to the only thing she knows: kicking the air. There's a cute moment where a bug lands on the back of her shirt and she screams in fear like a child. Chie is actually scared of a lot of things a child would be scared of, like bugs, thunderstorms, and the darkness. We also meet worst boy Takeshi. Seriously, this guy is f***ed up. Takeshi is Chie's ex. Now, how long they were together isn't specified, but they broke up sometime in middle school. This guy is at least partially responsible for Chie's complex. Apparently, he was always ogling Yukiko throughout his relationship with Chie. He also mentions how he should try for Yukiko again, not so subtly implying that he was ready and willing to cheat on Chie. In middle school, he shows up again later to everyone's dismay and starts making a fucking waifu tier list right into Chie's face. That's weird enough as is to do with fictional characters, but he's talking about girls that are real to him, right? And he ranks them like he's on his little Gunner Discord burner account. God. Before that, however, you and Chie learn about bullying incidents happening around the shopping district, which enrages Chie. like a lot. But when you actually catch the bullies in the act of extorting money from, you guessed it, Takeshi, Chie wants to beat them up right then and there. You know, I probably would have kept walking there, like... But maybe that's just me. I am not a model citizen. Now, after the Takeshi tier list thing, which he originally came up to apologize for running away from the bullies, by the way, leaving Chie to fend for herself. By the way, Chie recognizes that her jumping at the throat of self-improvement was missing the point. She simply didn't know what she was even trying to improve about herself, never mind how to go about doing that. So basically, despite her fierce resolve, nothing had really changed. Throughout the link, she eventually realizes that her goal, which is a simple goal, isn't that simple to achieve. She just wants to protect people, but was misled by thinking that self-improvement means self-reliance. Just as others rely on Chie, it's fine for Chie to rely on others too, rather than rejecting it completely after what her shadow said. For her, it's the realization that what she really wants has nothing to do with the aspects of others she's jealous of. That helps her in combating her complex. No use being jealous of something you don't even want. By accepting and overcoming her weakness, Tomoe transforms into Suzuka Gongen. I think the problem explored in this link is something many people face. You know, the desire to change or improve, but not really knowing what to do or what to even strive for, really. I like it. And good news, we won't see Takeshi again. Alright, next up is... Again, let me begin by refreshing your memory. Shadow Yosuke doesn't give a shit about anyone or anything. As long as he gets enjoyment out of it, who cares? He uses Saki's death as a pretense of concern so he can go play hero. Again, all that was an alternate possibility, not necessarily how Yosuke feels right now, but it's built on a real problem he has, which is feeling isolated and bored, unable to connect with people, and keeping everyone at arm's length. His arcana is number 1, the Magician. This arcana is all about power and action, bringing an idea to life using the skills you have. A common theme associated with the Magician is being too ambitious, having goals that are too much to handle for the skill set you have at that time. A delicate balance between self-confidence and overconfidence. I'm not gonna say the line. Immediately, you two connect superficially over being from the city. And just as immediately, the biggest downside of living in the countryside shows itself. Gossip. Yosuke being the son of the Junes store manager, many people in Inaba falsely project their feelings of anger and concern about Junes onto Yosuke. He says he doesn't mind since he can't change things anyway, but speaks his annoyance about always having to watch himself since he's kind of a brand rep for Junes, or certainly treated like one. He talks about how his old friends from the city never seem to text or call, and Yosuke can't even remember what they used to talk about all the time while he was there. Now, while his friendships in the city were only ever skin deep, really, he still seems disappointed about being forgotten. Now, we spent time with him at Junes too, where he's constantly being pestered by loud-mouthed staff because he's the manager's kid and he can pull strings. Yosuke says that this has been happening for a while, but he's extra annoyed by this now because he'd rather invest his time and nerves into pursuing the murder cases. That is what seems to give him purpose right now. A greater goal, something that actually matters to him. That loud-mouthed staff is quite heavy-handed by Atlas. They talk about how jobs are for suckers and they should go prostitute themselves instead if they get desperate. Just like Saki. Wait, what the where did this come from? Anyway, it's all rumors. Don't believe them. They also just routinely don't show up for work when they don't feel like it, and they are pretty cartoonishly useless and messed up all around. Atlas has something to say here, but I can't create evidence of me saying that. I'm sure you can figure it out. When they later come back to accuse Yosuke of favoring Saki on the job, bad-mouthing the deceased all the while, he loses it and tells them off. Doesn't have the power to fire, but I kinda wish he did. But Yosuke is upset at himself for shouting, calling it another pathetic display by Yosuke. Like, he wants to be a stoic and not care so badly, but cares too much to keep quiet, lowering his walls. Acting on feelings seems to embarrass him, understandably so. Rank 8 is when he realizes that he's been misusing the case as just another hyperfixation to distract him from the fact that Saki, who Yosuke really did care about, isn't coming back. He talks big because he does feel purpose now, and yes, he has superpowers now, but he hasn't actually faced himself at all yet, leading him to the conclusion that once the investigation ends, he will have nowhere to run from himself, making the murder case he cares so much about just another distraction on the way to the grave. Fuck, man. Something that isn't said out loud until the end of the link is that he wants to be the leader of the investigation team. He wants to be the big hero. He's jealous of the protagonist because they're the kind of special he wants to be. By the end, he realizes that, you know, maybe he doesn't care all that much about being a big hero or about being special after all. He conflates being special with having meaning. That was his true aspiration, is to find meaning in his life that he saw as so boring and pointless.
It's not what you have or what you can do.
Meaning is not something that can be measured. His persona Jiraiya transforms into Susanoo. Now, I used to not feel very much about this link until I really stopped to think about it for this video. And dare I say I love it, but I still struggle to articulate why. The realization that maybe you just don't have what it takes to reach your goal really fucking hurts, but not admitting that to yourself when the time has come will only make you more miserable. By evaluating yourself honestly, you give yourself a chance to reconsider what's even important to you. If you believe in things like tarot and fortune telling, that means you believe in fate. And well, some people might just be fated to be stuck in second place, and finding meaning in failure is easier said than done. So, after I began writing and recording this Persona 4 thing, the more research I did and the more I thought about what I wanted to say, it just kept becoming longer and longer and longer still. And as such, I'm delighted to still have you with me here at the end of part 1. Yes, I'm pulling the rug, I'm sorry. If you've enjoyed your time here, then please like and subscribe if you don't want to miss part 2, in which I'm gonna go over the middle portion of the game as well as most of the social links. Tell me what you thought in the comments, and I wish you a great rest of your day.